Coming up on this episode, a Swedish fishing village chases the Allsvenskan title, the Marshall Islands make their international debut, and the world's tallest outfield footballer arrives in Vietnam. Hello, and welcome to the Sweeper Podcast, the World Football Podcast made in association with FIFA Plus. I'm Lee Wingate.
And I'm Paul Watson.
And we're back for another fun-filled dash around the planet to round up all of our favourite football headlines. Up first today in part one is a selection of stories from Europe, and they've all got a bit of a geography theme. Talking of which, Paul, you've just come back from Cornwall. Did you pay a visit to AFC Mousehole, the most westerly club in the English leagues?
I didn't, but I also think we're going to fall into one of these pronunciation ones here, Lee. Is it not pronounced Mousehole?
That would make more sense, but isn't Mousehole a much better name?
Yeah, and I think I have called it Mousehole before and been very severely reprimanded by people in Cornwall. So yeah, it's an amazing name, amazing part of the country as well. Had a lovely time in Cornwall, but sadly did not make it that far. Just stayed in Newquay. How about you though, Lee? You've been moving house. I can see by your backdrop, you've got a very kind of cool new backdrop, different formation of shirts. I feel like this is a new season, a new Wingate lineup.
Yeah, I have moved house. I didn't fancy lugging all the furniture myself, so we got a removal firm to do it. And I pride myself on having quite an ear for recognising various European languages. But for the first few hours of the day, I just could not recognise the language that the two removal guys were speaking. So in the end, I just asked them, hey guys, what language are you speaking? And they said, oh, we're speaking Chechenian. At which point I kind of forgave myself for not recognising that. And then I said, oh, right, so do you like football? Do you support Akhmat Grozny? And they were like, no, Bayern Munich.
Oh, come on. Look, we've had this before. You've gone to that effort. You've named their local club. Yeah. The least they could do is pretend to support them, right?
Yeah. Would have been the polite thing to do, yeah. But let's dive into the stories for today. We're going to start with a brilliant story from Sweden. Mjällby, the villagers taking the Allsvenskan by storm. Now, we got a lot of help for this segment from Alex Brotherton, a BBC sport journalist. He sent us in a brilliant voice note. Sadly, we're not able to use it. So, Paul, you and I are going to dissect Mjällby's incredible Allsvenskan campaign. And the reason that this, I think, is so interesting to us and to many other media outlets is that the club are based in Hellavik, a fishing village on the south coast of Sweden with a population of 1,485 people. They could become the smallest club to ever win a major UEFA league. They are currently 5 points clear, I think, with 1/3 of the season to go. What an amazing, amazing story this is.
Yeah, and I must admit my Swedish football knowledge is not the world's greatest. So it seemed to have come out of nowhere somewhat for me, certainly, that this club are leading the way. And I remember from the start of the season, obviously they had a great start, but you don't expect it to carry on this long. And they're within sight of the finish line now, right?
Yeah, I mean, they've just beaten Malmö. That was away from home, Sweden's record champions. They won that one, and then I think they won again at the weekend thanks to like a last-minute goal, like stoppage time winner. And I think when things like that start to happen, both you're beating the big clubs and you're winning the games that you're not playing well, the belief is probably starting to increase by this point. As I say, 1/3 of the season left, 10 games, and this probably would go down as one of the great European football stories of the season. We've already heard the Leicester City comparison being mentioned quite a lot. But one of the things that I really like most about this story is it's not a case of a rich owner bankrolling a football club. Sweden has the same 50+1 rule as Germany, which keeps the majority ownership of a football club in the hands of the fans, and also means that they then can't have a very rich owner who just bankrolls them all the way. You know, that goes to show, doesn't it, that this is a success built on merit and not money.
Yeah, absolutely. It seems very embedded in the local community, this success. As you say, it's not an external thing. It's not like a sort of false victory for them. It's genuinely been built through this local community. What I found fascinating was that the stadium, the capacity is 6,500, right, which in itself is not massively big for a top-flight European club, but it's, 4 times the population of the actual village.
Yeah.
So part of me was thinking, where are they coming from, the fans? They must be coming from like the whole area, the whole region. But I wonder how many fans have adopted the club because of this success, and how many are like the old school who are like, where were you when we were?
Yeah.
Where were you when we were getting 150?
I think the wider municipality has about 14,000 people. So
okay.
perhaps fans are coming from the surrounding area. And I think when you start to have success, when you start to have a season like this, then that obviously draws more people in. We've mentioned that they're not bankrolled by a rich owner. So how have they done it, I guess, is the question. And it seems like they have just placed their faith in new ideas, which we love to see. It's bold to name, for example, an assistant manager who's never had a senior coaching role before. But this guy, Karl Marius Axum, he has a PhD in visual perception in elite football.
Yeah, I love that. I love that as a PhD, right? Imagine telling your parents, right, what are you going to do? What are you going to do with your life? Well, I'm going to do a PhD in visual perception in elite football.
Oh,
right?
No.
Have you considered English?
The focus of this PhD was on scanning, which refers to active head movements players make before receiving the ball. So a pass is about to come and you're looking around you basically to try and determine who's around you, what you should do next. And I think this is just another example of the evolution of football in a direction where every single thing can be a marginal gain that can give you that edge. And I find it fascinating that apparently this has rejuvenated Mjällby's attacking play, because they used to be a club that primarily played down the wings, lots of crosses into the box. Now I think they're having a bit more time on the ball because of the scanning, and they're playing a lot more through the middle of the pitch, which seems to have brought them a lot of success in attack as well as defence.
I do find that fascinating. And as you say, what's really interesting is how these little advances can happen at clubs, just seemingly quite random clubs around the world, pop up with a new way of doing things. And, maybe in 5 years' time, literally every single club will have a guy doing exactly what this coach has brought in. But it's amazing how just someone with some new ideas who has just one specific area of expertise can say, let's make that our point of difference. And yeah, it seems like it's really worked here, hasn't it?
Mm. A couple of other things from Alex's article that we'd really like to mention, just a couple of really quirky little facts. Apparently one opposition supporter wrote on social media after visiting Mjällby Stadium, "It should be impossible to play football here. Nobody lives here. There is one shop and only animals."
That sounds a little bit salty, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Sounds like somebody who's lost unexpectedly to a smaller club.
Yeah, I think so. And another thing I liked about this is that because the place is so small, apparently several members of the first team squad all live in the same building and they meet up for barbecues whenever they have free time. This kind of really gives me British university vibes, where you're all in like a halls of residence.
It does, doesn't it? It really does. It's a really lovely story, isn't it? All of it. It's very wholesome and organic. And I think this is sometimes something that happens with us, where we find a club that has unexpectedly sort of taken a league by storm. And so often when you scratch down or we post about the club, it comes out there's some dodgy money, there's an ugly side to it. So it's really lovely that the more you hear about the club, the nicer this story becomes. And I've got to say, we're always talking about what is the bucket list for sweeper trips, and this one sounds pretty great, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think it's just going to be quite hard to get to. I think you would either have to fly to Stockholm, and then it's down on the south coast. It's a little fishing village by the coast. If you look at it from an aerial view, it's just a football pitch, a few houses, and a campsite. That's it.
What more do you need?
Yeah, at least it's a place to stay. Or it would be going via Copenhagen, probably going across the Øresund Bridge, which we talked about on the last episode, and then heading across via Malmö. That would probably be the other way to do it. But I doubt we'll get there this season. Only 10 games left. But during those 10 games, I think we have to keep a firm eye on this, because this will be one of the biggest football headlines in Europe, I think, if they get over the line here.
I think so. And maybe we'll turn up for their first ever European match if they can pull it off.
Yeah.
Because they've not been in Europe before, right? So that must be pretty likely now, I'd say, at this point.
Yeah, but because of the fact it's a summer league season, so it finishes in November, and then they'll have to wait until the following summer. So yeah, it'll be summer 2026 that we'll see them in Europe.
Yeah, we'll start saving up anyway. If I know Scandinavia, we should probably start putting pennies in the jar right now, Lee.
Yeah, I think we already should have started, to be honest. Believe it or not, Mjällby are not the smallest club in the top tier of a major UEFA nation. That honour goes to Bruk-Bet Tamalica, who come from the southern Polish village of Niczyza, which has only 750 people in it. Paul, this village is so small that it doesn't even have its own train station. I posted that on social media, and somebody responded with, "How is that a relevant fact?"
I love our feedback, Lee. We love our feedback.
To be honest, we have a lot of irrelevant facts on this show and on our social media. That one I don't think is one of them. Because how do you get there as an away fan?
Exactly, right. And part of what we do as a podcast is we talk about, places people might like to go. There's a lot of groundhoppers, a lot of really well-travelled football fans who love the niche football trip. So if there's not a way to get there. And didn't someone actually respond by talking about how they'd had to walk through a cornfield to get there and stuff like that? So people basically, and locals were sort of saying, yeah, you'll have to walk through the cornfield, of course. I was like, well, this isn't normal.
On that topic, when they first got to the Extraklasse, I think it was 2015, they started having problems with some away fans that would cause trouble and then dash off into the cornfields, and the police would lose them. So what the club had to do was start cutting down the cornfields in the immediate vicinity of the stadium so that away fans couldn't start causing trouble and then just disappear.
In the cornfield?
Yeah, in the cornfield.
Wow. I mean, I guess that's what happens. You get to a certain level, Lee, you got to shed your cornfield.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
The smallest club in Europe. I mean, if we base this on the location of the home stadium, up until last season, it was Loughgall of Northern Ireland, who had just 282 people in their village. If we're going to say it's the place where the club is based, then it has to go to San Marino's AS San Giovanni, whose home parish of San Giovanni Sotto le Penne has 30 people in it. If we presume, Paul, that half of them are men, 15, that's not even enough for a match day squad in the home parish.
I'll back myself to get on the bench in this situation, I've got to say. I remember seeing that. And it's a little bit of a technicality, isn't it? A bit like when we talk about the Faroese club, Vikingur Gotha, being the smallest in European competition a lot of the time. And it's true that Nordre Gotha itself, where the stadium is tiny, isn't it? But they are, I think, a merger. They had a club from Lervig, which is like a fair bit bigger, that merged with them. So obviously everyone from there also supports the club, which again is not a massive place, but it's a bit like that with San Giovanni in that I think it kind of represents a patch of San Marino. So it has a slightly more than 30, but pretty tiny.
Yeah, I think it's Borgio Maggiore is one of the provinces. I think that's who they represent. Let's continue the geography theme, because we're going to dash over to Lithuania now, Paul, and the most central location in Europe. In 1989, the French National Geographic Institute established that the village of Panuškės in Lithuania, which is 25 kilometers north of Vilnius, is the exact center of Europe. I think when you look at a European map, you wouldn't necessarily think Lithuania is the center of it, would you?
No, I don't think I would have gone with Lithuania at all. I'd actually be quite embarrassed to see where I would have banged that centre point, probably somewhere embarrassing like Belgium. But yeah, you wouldn't necessarily put Lithuania. No, that's interesting.
Yeah, I would have gone more. I mean, I feel a little bit like living in Vienna is the...
Actually, you're right. Vienna, people always talk about Austria as being like the centre of Europe, don't they? And I think if jokes aside, I think I probably would have gone for like that Austria sort of area, like definitely would have put it down there, yeah.
Well, this is recognised as the centre of Europe, Panushkas, by the Guinness Book of Records. And the way that it was calculated is called a centroid method. And I asked AI to explain what a centroid method is in layman's terms. They basically said, imagine you cut out everything you define as Europe on a piece of cardboard and find the point it would perfectly balance on a single pin. And apparently it's that point in Lithuania. I have no idea how you do that with a piece of cardboard. How do you factor the islands in there? No idea how they did that.
It does sound like something you might have done, Lee. It sounds like something I'd say, Lee, what have you been up to? Well.
The centroid method of Europe, Paul.
Yeah.
But this did get me thinking, how does this relate to football? Well, what are the two most central top-flight football clubs in Europe? And they are Žalgiris Vilnius and Riteriai, who share the LFF stadium in Vilnius. They are the two most central top-flight European football clubs. And this weekend, they played against each other. We had the Centre of Europe derby, which Žalgiris won 2-1. But even before this game, there had been stories attached to both of these teams that we wanted to tell on the podcast. Should we start with Žalgiris Vilnius and their sort of unorthodox protest?
Yeah, and I think this one has probably been seen by a lot of our listeners because it was amazing. The fans were pretty unhappy, I think it's fair to say, at Žalgiris Vilnius. They're a giant in Lithuania. The club has been struggling really badly. They found themselves in the wrong half of the table for a lot of the season, which, is unthinkably bad. And their manner of protest was to launch suitcases onto the field to demand the sacking of their coach, Vladimir Cheburin. Now, what's funny for me is these are heavy things. These are suitcases flying onto the pitch. And when I saw it, I thought, it's a riot. What's going on? And then I thought, they're throwing suitcases. Mm-hmm. But it didn't clock that they were throwing them to say, pack your bags. Mm-hmm. I was just like, wow, they throw suitcases in Lithuania.
Yeah.
It's such an obvious link. But I was like, it means, get out.
I feel like Lithuanian suitcases should now be the new expression for London buses. You know that thing, London buses, nothing happens and then two times it happens at once. Well, this is the second podcast in a row that we've talked about Lithuanian suitcases, because last time out it was Penebont's luggage going missing on their European trip to Lithuania. This time it's a bizarre protest, and there are rumours that the manager in question is not bothered by this protest because of what reason, Paul?
Well, yeah, there were rumours at the time, and I have no idea if there's anything to this, that he was in a relationship with the club owner, who's a very controversial figure, Vilma Venslovatiene. But there's even been a development since in that she is now gone. There's been a huge sort of scandal where the club and the way that she took ownership of the club, or the way she took a majority ownership of the club, was questioned and challenged by the ultras of the club. Lots of accusations got thrown around. We're not in a position to dig into the ins and outs of Lithuanian finances, but she's actually gone after, I think, 14 years at the helm of the club. But the coach, I don't believe, has gone. But yeah, the fans were throwing this accusation that you're never going to sack him because you're in a relationship with him. I have no idea if that's true or if that was just sort of fan talk. But what I do know is, the fans have been incredibly unhappy and that she is gone.
What about Riteriai then, the other most central top-flight club in Europe? Why have they come to our attention?
Well, this will be the only fan incident, Lee, which is friend of the show and very famous YouTuber Ellis Platten, who I think everyone knows who Ellis Platten is with his Away Days series, did a video where he said, I become a football team's only fan. And I think he knew what he was doing using the term only fan.
Yes. Yeah.
The club in question was FK Riteriai. So it was the idea that this club just had no support. He was going to go over and be their kind of one ultra with a banner and sort of basically be their kind of support, a bit like, in a weird way, a bit like we've seen in San Marino with the Brigata Mai Una Gioia, adopt a team that seems to have no real support. And I think it's a really interesting and fun idea, but it seemed to bring up quite a lot of dynamics in Lithuanian football that I think he had no idea about necessarily in advance, and we certainly didn't.
Yeah, I mean, the video is great. I mean, I love that Ellis does this kind of stuff. He took his two friends, Alfie and Ben, with him as well. And they bought, like, because the club's colours, I think they were sort of playing a luminous or neon kit. So they bought a green drum, green pyro, and homemade tifos. And all around, they were just met by bemusement and strange looks in a country which is not really known for its football, is it? I think, is it basketball that's the main sport there?
Yeah, and this is interesting, isn't it? Because I wasn't really aware of that. I'm not a basketball person, but yeah, basketball is definitely king. And, basketball does attract the kind of crowds we're used to seeing in football matches. But yeah, I did find that interesting that a club at the level that Riteriai are at, a top flight club could have so little interest in them, or the video certainly seems to show that.
I mean, the video also showed that people in the country don't really know who they are, because before the game, they were going up to people in Vilnius and saying, hey, do you know this football club? And holding up the flag with the Riteriai badge on it. And nobody knew. Only one person was able to tell them, well, that's the Lithuanian word for night. Not as in day and night, but as in guy with a sword. That was all they were able to tell them. So it seems that nobody knew who Riteriai is. But yeah, it's a great video. I'd recommend checking it out. We'll stick a link to it in the episode description, as we will for the previous story, Alex's article about Mjällby, so you can see those in the description. But for now, to round off part one, we are going to move over to Belgium and the football club based on the weirdest border on the European continent. Now, they're called Dosko Hertog. They play in the Antwerp division of the Belgian provincial leagues. Now, if I've calculated this correctly, Paul, that equates to the 9th tier of the country's football pyramid. And they are a thoroughly unremarkable club, except for the fact that they are located on this border, which is just scattered with enclaves. It looks like a complete patchwork. Now, we'll throw a photo up on screen so you can see this for the people that are watching the video version of this podcast. At this border area of Hertog in Belgium and Nassau in the Netherlands, there are 22 Belgian enclaves inside the Netherlands and 7 Dutch counter-enclaves inside those Belgian enclaves. It's like enclave inception here.
You can't have an enclave within an enclave. Why don't they just agree that there's no enclave at all? I'm really confused.
Yeah, I mean, that would be the logical thing. But the reason that it is like this is due to medieval feudal land swaps. So different dukes swapping land. And then when modern borders were established, they left it as it was, which is why you've got this bizarre sort of patchwork of enclaves on the Belgian Dutch border. And this results in very odd situations where you have houses and shops straddling the border. And so what they decided to come up with is that to determine which side of the border those houses and shops are on, they use where your front door is. So if your front door is on the Belgian side, then you're in Belgium. But you can have a border running through your house, running through your shop. During the pandemic, they had borders running through the shop, and they had to close one half of the shop, and they just put all the goods on the other half of the shop because the borders running through it. It's absolutely bizarre. Where this relates to football is this provincial football club whose stadium is on the Belgian side, but their car park is on the Dutch side. So their entire facilities are straddling the border. It's amazing.
That's brilliant. They should be able to play in both national systems, really, shouldn't they? And play one game in one league and one game in another league, and at the end of the season, see which league they've done better in, Belgium or the Netherlands. It's crazy.
Yeah, they've got quite a bit of Dutch influence, I think, unsurprisingly. I think they say we're a Belgian club with a bit of a Dutch mentality. But yeah, it's interesting. This is not the only example of football clubs based right on borders. We've discussed a few before. I think we mentioned the lower league club in Bosnia-Herzegovina called Partizan Bosanska Kozačnica. Their stadium crosses their pitch is actually 2/3 in Bosnia and 1/3 in Croatia, which did take on an extra dimension in 2023 when Croatia joined Schengen, meaning that it became an external EU border.
Wow.
which means, to run across the full pitch, you're literally crossing in and out of the EU.
Players getting stopped at passport control in the centre circle. So it slows down your moves. It slows down a breakaway when you have to fill in the forms as you go.
It does, doesn't it? I've heard they're not so good at counter-attacking there. But we have been told on social media that the border has been revised and the stadium no longer sits on it. I really hope that's not the case, Paul, because I love the idea that they're having to think about passports and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, bring your passport. All the players have them like in their pockets as they're playing. Yeah, I like that idea.
The other one is Chester, right? Because Chester FC in the National League North in the 6th tier of English football, their ground is also in Wales.
Yeah, this was always the go-to one growing up was Chester because I think
the go-to one growing up.
Oh, if someone unexpectedly challenges you. Like being mugged. Name a stadium that crosses borders.
Our childhoods were just different, weren't they?
This is why we are as we are, Lee.
Yeah.
So Chester, I think it's the pitch is in Wales, but a lot of the offices and the car park are in England. So it's always been a funny one, that, hasn't it? The English-Welsh border with Chester and the fact the club are in the English system. Very much seen as an English club, but so close to the border.
I think they also had repercussions because of that during the pandemic, because there were different numbers of spectators that were permitted at grounds in England and Wales. I think there was a particular point in time where a maximum of 50 people could attend games on Welsh territory, and I think they had to have discussions with the police about how to approach that.
Honestly, Wales and England, put that, and then you got the New Saints, who are the sort of dominant force in Welsh football when they play in England. They constant problems, Lee. Constant English-Welsh border problems here.
Yeah. And then you've got the Welsh quartet that actually play in the English football pyramid as well.
And
so
that, yeah.
Mental, huh? Well, that was a fun segment. I enjoyed that. I hope our geography enthusiasts among the listeners did too. But for now, time to say goodbye to Europe, take a quick break, and then we'll come back with tales from North and Central America, plus Oceania in part 2. Welcome back to part 2 of The Sweeper. We're paying a visit to some other continents in this segment, and I think there is only one place to start. The first ever international football matches for the Marshall Islands. Paul, it's finally happened. They're on the international football map.
They are, Lee, and in incredible style. I don't know how many people amongst our listeners have been following the Marshall Islands story from the beginning, but this is a national team from scratch that have come to the point where they were playing international matches against proper established FIFA nations. And the fact is that those results were 4-0 defeat to the US Virgin Islands and then a 3-2 loss to the Turks and Caicos, who, to be honest, were very lucky to win that match, Turks and Caicos, because Marshall Islands were all over them and could quite easily have won it. And I don't think it's much of an exaggeration to say this is one of the greatest underdog achievements in the history of international football.
Yeah, I mean, I'd go along with that. I'd agree with that. This was the Outrigger Challenge Cup, right? This was the friendly tournament that the Marshall Islands had organised in Arkansas because it's the home to the biggest Marshallese community outside of the islands. And they invited, as you say, US Virgin Islands, Turks and Caicos, initially Guam, but then they pulled out. So the Ozark United under-19s took their place. And I think that you're right. This is one of the great international football stories because they didn't have an FA 5 years ago. With the help of all of these overseas volunteers, they've taken it from absolutely nothing to the point where they are playing in front of crowds and playing their first ever international match. And you watched both of them, didn't you? Because they made them both available to stream
I did.
online.
I did. The times were absolutely savage. Well, the first one's time was savage for the UK audience. It was, I think it started at 2 a.m. UK time. But, this was a moment of genuine history, like the first international match for a nation. But also, obviously, I have kind of an attachment to that part of the world and had been following this story from the very beginning. So I really wanted to see this first international. I have to say, Lee, I was so nervous watching this match. I was unspeakably nervous because this team had only a matter of days together. So you had players coming from Majuro, players coming from Kwajalein in the Marshall Islands. You also had this contingent of US-based players. But they'd actually only met for 5 or 6 days in a training camp. And the coaches had this really limited window to get them ready to play against teams that play international matches, frequently. They play World Cup qualifiers, these teams. So I was getting ready to watch this game, and this is with no disrespect whatsoever. I didn't know if this game was going to end 15-0 to the Virgin Islands, or whether this was going to be competitive. You couldn't tell, and I don't even know if the coaches could have known at that point how this would go. So that first game, while they lost 4-0, it was actually an enormous moment because they played so well. Some of the football they played, the Marshall Islands hit the post. They were very much, for periods, the stronger team. If you just tuned in after, say, 20 minutes, you would have thought they might be the FIFA team. It's just they conceded an early goal. They conceded a very unlucky penalty. But the way they played in that game was something really special. And obviously in front of this crowd of Marshallese people who just, obviously hugely getting behind this team, seeing their nation represented on the football stage for the first time. Yeah, it was something really special. And despite the fact that it was 4 a.m. when I went to bed, I felt like hugely excited for them because I kind of felt they could do it in the next game. I felt this was where that first goal was going to come.
It was the early hours of the 15th of August, which is my birthday. And Sonia, my girlfriend, did say to me, what do you want to do on your birthday? I felt that saying, let's set an alarm, wake up at 3 o'clock and watch the Marshall Islands' first ever international match might be a bit of a stretch. So sadly, I didn't watch them. But the second game that you did watch, you saw their first ever goal, right? It was by Josiah Blanton, a 23-year-old economics student at James Madison University in the US. And it was a lovely, lovely goal.
Yeah, and this is the thing. It was a lovely goal. More than that, they scored another goal. They also had a very viable shout for a penalty not given late on, for a second penalty. Their second goal was a penalty. But genuinely, and this is not me being sentimental or biased, they could have won that game. I really, for long periods, thought they were going to get a first international win in only their second ever game. And I think for context, you only have to look at other nations that have made international bows, especially in the Oceania region, and the disparity where you often have programmes that are getting hundreds of thousands of pounds of support per year from governing bodies. And this teams like this Marshall Islands team who had, a few thousand gained from crowdfunding. And often these games do end 20 or 30-0. I think Tonga, or at least the Cook Islands for sure, their first ever outing, I think, was a 20 or 30-0 defeat. And there's no shame in that. It's just there are years to catch up. So for them to be doing this against a team of that level was sensational. And I think Turks and Caicos were probably quite stunned by how good the Marshalls were. But it's a huge testament to that coaching team. I think there were Lloyd Hours, who has been in this from day one, and who took this on, when most people would tell you run a mile, took this project on. But also he had Justin Wally, who we remember from his Matabeleland, sort of quite a heroic and difficult job he did in the CONCACAF World Cup. He also had a couple of other coaches, including the goalkeeper coach, Matt Perella, who ended up playing in goal for the Marshall Islands, which I don't think he was expecting to do, and made a series of incredible saves. But the whole thing just sounded like a fairy tale, and it really did look like one.
Mm. We are going to be speaking to Lloyd Hours on a Patreon podcast, a special interview that will be coming up in the next couple of weeks. So if you want to hear that, all about Lloyd's memories of that first international window for the Marshall Islands, then join us on Patreon at patreon.com/sweeperpod. Paul, the fact that the Marshall Islands have now played their first game leaves tiny Nauru, the world's smallest island nation, as the only country on the planet to have never contested any sort of match. What does the future look like for Nauru? Will we see them follow in the footsteps of the Marshalls soon?
I don't think we will in the near future, but not for a particularly negative reason. So Nauru have been going about things in a slightly different way. I think they have some plans to announce, which they've been sort of leaving to allow the Marshall Islands, to go and do their thing. I don't think they wanted to sort of clash with that. It wouldn't have benefited either side, especially with both of them sort of coming out with this only country never to have played a match story. It just would have confused people. I think Nauru's focus, for two reasons, is going to be more on getting kids playing at a very young age. I think part of that is that I don't think, and I may be wrong, but I don't think Nauru has that that sort of diaspora community that have a football sort of pedigree. So I don't think they could pick a national team in the way the Marsh Lions did of talented players with heritage who are now in the US or, you know, that kind of route. I think the other thing is that, Nauru doesn't necessarily have players on island who play the sport, so they would have to do code switching. They'd have to get rugby union players, which they do play, Aussie rules, which is the main sport, to come and play football. And I think that's going to be quite a difficult process for them to undertake. So I think we can hopefully expect stuff to happen in Nauru, but it's not going to happen now. And I think it could be that we see a kind of cool youth project and then they enter the field in a few years' time.
Another story that came out of the 2025 Outrigger Challenge Cup was the US Virgin Islands Disney employee. I don't know if you saw this, Paul. We saw this from, I think, John Arnold on Twitter. And he wrote about the fact that the US Virgin Islands had a winger in their squad, Yannick Libbard, who qualifies to play for the US Virgin Islands thanks to his father, but actually has his day job working for Disney Plus, specifically on their coverage of the UEFA Champions and UEFA Europa Leagues. Amazing. He's working for Disney as his full-time job and playing for the US Virgin Islands in his spare time.
I mean, that's the dream, isn't it? That's the absolute dream. And I do think, actually, this is something worth mentioning. Like, understandably, so much of our focus on this tournament is going to be about the Marshall Islands. This tournament was set up by the Marshall Islands. It was their moment in the sun, and I think that's really important to celebrate. But let's also give some credit to the US Virgin Islands, who hadn't won a game for 3 years coming into this competition. Ended up lifting the trophy
and winning all three, right?
Yeah. Well, on penalties against Turks and Caicos. Okay. But you know, huge respect for them for that, and also really exciting player in Raheem Joseph, who scored a hat-trick against the Marshall Islands, was player of the tournament. What an amazing player he specifically seems to be, but also the attitude of the team and the way they took this tournament on. The games were played in quite quick succession. I think you will have noticed, like, teams were playing a lot of games in a short, sharp spell, which was how it had to be. And that's really difficult. And they threw themselves into it, and they really played brilliantly. I thought the US Virgin Islands, they really surprised me. I thought Turks and Caicos were the stronger side coming in, albeit they didn't have their hero, Billy Forbes, who I think might be going towards retirement. He's one of these Ildefons Lima characters who's like the record cap scorer and goal scorer and just everything for them. He wasn't there, even though he said he was going to be at one point, I think. But yeah, I did think Turks and Caicos would be the main threat, and US Virgin Islands really proved me wrong. They were excellent throughout. And also just the spirit of the whole thing. Everyone seemed to just be really enjoying this moment, and the Marshall Islands were the heroes, but also these other teams definitely deserve their credit.
Earlier this summer, do you know what the Disney Plus employee Yannick Libbard was doing at the after the UEFA Europa League final?
No, I don't.
Well, let me tell you. He wrapped up Disney Plus's coverage in Copenhagen, and then he got on a plane himself to play in the Caribbean's secondary club competition. So he was working on the secondary Continental Cup competition in Europe, and then he went to play in the one in the Caribbean for Rovers of the US Virgin Islands at the CFU Club Shield tournament, which took place, as I say, I think that was at the end. It was end of July, start of August, and we had quite a few interesting stories coming out of that because we had 24 clubs from 23 countries. So that's one club per country, except for Trinidad and Tobago, who, as the hosts, got 2 representatives. The title was won by Mocha of the Dominican Republic. But it was such a strange format, this tournament, wasn't it? It's bizarre how they organised it.
Yeah, this tournament was... I had to just keep checking this was actually how it was supposed to be. So it was 4 6-team groups, but everyone only plays 2 matches.
Yeah.
Right?
Which leads to a table that's just really unbalanced. And also, if you're playing... It's just luck of the draw, right? If you're playing against one of the weaker or stronger teams.
Yeah, but didn't it get even worse in one of the groups because the representatives from Haiti couldn't attend? So the teams that were scheduled to play against them got 3-0 walkovers. But in the context of only playing 2 games, a 3-0 walkover win is fairly significant, right?
Yeah, and I mean, what happened here is that 3-0 walkover win for, I think it was Academy Eagles of the Turks and Caicos Islands, that took them to joint top of the table, both on points and goal difference. And what that meant is that they then needed to decide who would progress to the next round, because only the group winner went through, on fair play. And the team that got the 3-0 walkover win, Academy Eagles, they'd obviously played 1 game fewer, so they probably were likely to have fewer yellow cards. So they went through in place of Academia Quintana of Puerto Rico.
Yeah, so you have this situation where, Academia Quintana won both their games with a +8 goal difference, but were knocked out of the competition by a team who played 1 game because they had fewer yellow cards. It was, I've got to say we've seen some chaotic formats, but this was one of the worst. And I suppose it came about in part. It was kind of brought to a head by the unfortunate thing that AS Capoeis couldn't attend, and no one could have quite seen that coming. I guess that was very close to the tournament date, wasn't it?
Yeah, right beforehand. And why was it that they couldn't come, Paul?
They couldn't find an airline that would take them, I believe, which sounds kind of strange, doesn't it? But they just literally couldn't get any flights.
I think Haiti is going through a particularly bad moment. I think instability there has been present for years, but the security situation in the country seems terrible at the moment. There's been an intensification of gang violence. 3,100 people have been killed in 2025 alone. 1.3 million displaced this year too. So the situation is pretty dire there, and it does make you wonder whether the Haitian representative at the 2025 CONCACAF Caribbean Cup, which kicks off the day before this podcast goes out, if that will be affected, because if they couldn't find an airline to take them 2 weeks ago, will Juventus Decay find an airline to take them to that tournament?
Yeah, mate. I mean, it's funny, isn't it? You'd think not, and you'd think this kind of things maybe would already be planned and sorted out. But judging from the last tournament, I'm not sure we'll know until the very eve of the competition, which is a shame, really, because it leaves very little time to scramble someone else, which I imagine a lot of teams would have liked to be part of this, but at a few days' notice, they're not going to be able to make it.
At the CFU Club Shield, the participants included the Jamaican team Arnett Gardens, who were the reigning champions, Police, who represent Trinidad and Tobago's police force, and Guyana Defence Force, whose team is fielded by the country's military. But, Paul, I think the participant that we need to talk about is arguably the story of the tournament, Weymouth Wales of Barbados, who are used to dominating at home. I think they're about 16 points clear in the Barbados League at the moment. But they reached the final of this tournament, ultimately losing, but as a result qualifying for the CONCACAF Caribbean Cup and becoming the first ever Barbadian team to do so.
Yeah, amazing effort from them. I think Weymouth Wales have been on the radar a little bit because we recommend teams, for example, people you can watch on FIFA Plus. We recommend leagues, and their league is in there. And I specifically have been keeping an eye on Weymouth Wales because for a bit I thought they were on for a perfect season. They didn't actually manage that in the end, but their domination of that league over the last few years has been absolutely complete. But it's quite something to take that form into regional competition as they have. So yeah, really big moment, I think for them and for the nation.
Interested to see how they get on. This is a tournament which, unlike the CFU Club Shield, which took place over 2 weeks in one location, this is spread from August to December and is involving 10 clubs from 6 different countries. So Weymouth Wales and Mocha, who I mentioned. We've also got Cibao and O&M from the Dominican Republic, Cavalier and Mount Pleasant from Jamaica, Juventus Decay from Haiti, Robin Hood of Suriname, and Defence Force and Central from Trinidad and Tobago. So, Any of those stand out to you, Paul?
Well, we always talk about Robin Hood, don't we? And it's not just a fantastic name and actually brilliant kit as well. It's a lovely kit if you ever look at it. It's just a great combination of colours. But yeah, like Robin Hood, obviously with the name suggests, were set up to create footballing opportunities for some of the poorest people in Paramaribo. So they're a very cool club, like a really interesting, different story. So yeah, we always like to keep an eye on them. But also just geographically, right? This is another quirk that Suriname is taking part in the competition, but is obviously in South America. So it's a distance, isn't it?
Yeah. I think it is easier for them to travel to play against CONCACAF nations than South American ones. But it is interesting that they are the geographical outlier in this tournament. There's also the fact that if Juventus Decay from Haiti do travel to or are able to participate in this tournament, then there will be a Hispaniola derby. This is the shared island by Haiti and the Dominican Republic, because both Juventus Decay and I think, who else is it in that group? O&M, perhaps? I haven't got the draw right in front of me right now, but they will be playing against a team from the other... No, Cibao it is. Cibao in Group B. They'll be playing against a team from the other half of the island. And we've talked a little bit about the geopolitical situation on that island before, and the sort of comparative wealth in the Dominican Republic compared to the poverty and the instability in Haiti. I wonder if that is going to give the game a bit of an extra dimension. Would it count as like a local rivalry? Because we see in Europe, when there are geopolitical tensions, a lot of fixture pairings are banned, but this one isn't. And yet, from my basic knowledge of the situation, it seems like one that maybe should be. Yeah,
that's a good point. I mean, there's definitely a tension there. I'm not sure if it's necessarily like a violent sense of a violent rivalry. I suppose also there's not going to be the fans there. I guess that's crucial, right? The fans won't be present. I imagine there'll be very few fans at all present from anyone but the local teams, right? I don't think there's particularly a track record of there being big travelling support. So maybe that takes some of the sting out of that one. Meanwhile, we've got to give a mention for vague name of the tournament. I love clubs with quite vague names, and O&M from the Dominican Republic are just Organización y Método, right? Organization and methods, actually. Yeah. It's just such a vague name. It's like they had to sort of tick a box to say, like, what does your club do? Organizations and methods, I suppose.
There's another club in Central America as well called Comunicaciones.
Yes.
They just sound like departments in a company, don't they, these clubs?
They do. One of my favourites is in Costa Rica, there's football consultants.
Is that in the top league? I've never.
I think they're in the second tier. But they're a club just called like football consultants, and it's like you didn't like bring in. It's what you get if you hire like Deloitte to come in and make your football team for you instead of building your own team.
Brilliant. Well, we shall, of course, keep an eye on the Caribbean Cup as it unfolds over the coming months and let you know if the Haitian team, Juventus Decay, are able to take part. But we're going to round off this episode in Vietnam, Paul, because the world's tallest outfield football player, Kyle Ludlin, has joined, give me a minute here, Thep Zan Nam Dinh of Vietnam. He is 2 meters and 5 centimeters tall, 6'9". Somehow, I thought that there must be somewhere in the world a 7-foot outfield professional footballer, but apparently not. The Twitter account English Footballers Abroad have labelled him the tallest outfield player currently active in world football.
Yeah, and I think even when you think of players that you remember being really tall, like Nikola Zigic, Jan Koller, the Czech legend, they often come out around 6'7". Even the guys that you think, Peter Crouch, famous. I don't think he was more than 6'7", 6. So no, that is really, really tall, isn't it? And I think there have been goalkeepers at that 7-foot mark. Although you do wonder if at that point it really stops helping you as a goalkeeper, right? Because you just must be surely it's harder to get down to make saves. There's a point to which being 6'5" as a goalkeeper, you think, yeah, that's great. But when you get to 7 foot, is that an advantage? I wonder if it's an advantage for a player, though. Are they going to be just whipping in crosses to him? Because I'm thinking the average height in Vietnam must be lower than the average height in Europe, right?
Yeah, there were some great comments on this Twitter post announcing his move. Somebody put, just cross it and he'll end up with Messi numbers. Somebody else put, hope the defenders are allowed to carry a stepladder because that's just not fair. And somebody else commented upon the fact that the average height of men in Vietnam is only 5'3", 1.64 meters. Now, I doubt that necessarily applies to central defenders, but that is 41 centimeters less than Kyle Ludlin.
Wow, I mean, yeah, there'll be certainly some fingers pointed if he's not winning headers, won't there?
Yeah.
I don't know. You do wonder about that. Like, I don't know how he's got on so far. Has he?
He scored a header.
You don't have to be one of these like data analysts, do you, to work that one out?
He scored a header and a penalty, I think, in the Vietnamese Super Cup.
See, I'd love to be one of these video analysts who goes into like the in-depth like minutiae of a game and be like given the scouting report job for this one and say, I think he might be a problem from crosses.
Yeah. He has played 82 minutes so far, scored 2 goals. Not a bad start. But of course, Paul, we did have a little look into other tallest and shortest footballers and some oldest and youngest ones as well. The tallest currently active amateur footballer is a Danish forward called Jonathan Mauch, who is 7 foot tall. So I think he's 7'2" he might be, because he's 2 meters 14 and he plays in the German amateur leagues apparently.
Oh wow, okay, no, fair enough. I mean that's huge.
Meanwhile, the shortest professional footballer up until this summer, because he's just hung up his boots. He hasn't retired; he just can't reach them.
Top qualities.
Is the Polish midfielder Marcin Garuch, who is 5 foot tall, 1.54 m. He was a midfielder. I don't think there has ever been a player where the term diminutive applies better to him than this guy, right? 5 foot. He was playing in Poland's second tier, I think, and he became the shortest player to ever play in Poland's Ekstraklasse at some point as well.
Well, how good do you have to be on the ball to make that work? You must have to be an absolute magician. Or maybe he just got fouled all the time, so his team just constantly got free kicks. I don't know.
Yeah, or maybe he was a demon at headers. You never know. You never know. I doubt it, but you never know. From tallest and shortest players to oldest and youngest. Now, in Ukraine at the moment, there is a crazy gap between the oldest and the youngest professional footballers in the country, because they have the world's oldest professional footballer, Mykola Likovidov, the 59-year-old player president of Ukrainian third-tier club Real Farmer. He is still the oldest active professional footballer worldwide. He was recently interviewed by Nick Ames of The Guardian, and he credited 3 things with his longevity. Do you know what they are, Paul?
Oh, I remember we talked about this. The one that stuck with me was a sort of haka that he does, like a war dance, right, that he does in the warm-up.
Yeah, a haka-like warm-up is one of them. The others, brilliant, are naps and an artesian well next to the club's dressing room, which apparently has the best water in Ukraine.
See, I was going to say, is it one of these ones where it's like an inspiration to all players who are getting a bit older? All you need to do is haka like warm up. But the artesian well, that's tricky. That's tricky to replicate.
At the other end of the spectrum, the youngest ever player to play in the UPL made his debut this season for Ruk. His name is Oleg Zurinets, and he was 15 years and 17 days old. That means there's a 44-year difference between the oldest and youngest pro players in Ukraine at the moment. What was quite cute about Oleg Zurinets' debut was that he was interviewed after the match, as was his mum, who who does not look much older than him, to be honest.
So I guess his mum would still be playing, right? Say she was a footballer.
Yeah.
She'd still be, I mean, maybe she's a footballer. But she'd definitely be at an age where she could still be playing.
I think she's younger than both of us.
Well, that doesn't
say much, though, does it, these days? Yeah, and the youngest ever player to play in a professional match was, according to Sports Illustrated, Eric Godpower Marshall. in Liberia at the age pool of 10 years and 11 months.
What? 10 years? Was he known to be that young? Like, did he say he was older, or did people knowingly field a 10-year-old player?
Well, apparently this was in the 4th division of Liberian football, and I therefore do have massive doubts about the actual professional nature of it. But Sports Illustrated is a reliable source, and they say that he is the youngest pro player in the world. I suppose if God Power is your middle name, then maybe there's external forces at play there. Wow. Yeah, the oldest ever pro is Ezzeldin Bahader of Egypt, who played and scored for the 3rd-tier club 6th of October at the age of 74 years and 348 days.
What? And you say scored, that it was a penalty.
I have no idea, actually. I don't know.
It's got to be a penalty. But, oh my God, I'd never heard of that. I'd never heard of that guy. 74 years. Yeah, because I suppose we've sometimes touched upon the oldest professional players. We've had this topic a little bit, but I don't know if we've ever scratched totally down, because you feel like there are some that just drop off the radar, don't you? It's not. You often get like the oldest ones in European leagues or whatever, but it's quite a different thing. 74 years that's madness.
Yeah, if we've missed one, listeners, then do let us know, or indeed just send us a message to let us know where you're listening from at sweeperpod@gmail.com. We love getting emails from listeners, and we get some great ones, not just contributing stories, but people letting us know that they're enjoying the pod. And sometimes Paul and I, we speak in these Riverside studio recording sessions, but we don't have, it's not like our listeners are here and we can engage with them. So we do love hearing from you. If you want to get in touch with us, sweeperpod@gmail.com. If you're enjoying the show, please leave us a review out of 5 stars on Spotify or Apple. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter @SweeperPod. And if you want to hear from us again soon, join us on Patreon to listen to interviews with the Spanish football journalist Alex Fitzpatrick, who is going to Ceuta's opening home game of the season. That's the club based in Africa that play in the Spanish 2nd Division. And we're going to be speaking, as I mentioned earlier, to the Marshall Islands head coach Lloyd Hours. You can also hear from Alderney FC's chairman Rob Kirkland. So we've got a lot of interviews coming up on the Patreon at the moment, haven't we, Paul?
Yeah, and this is something we're keen to kind of drive, is just creating more of this kind of content for our listeners who enjoy it, who are part of our Patreon. So our Patreon is what keeps this pod running and keeps us able to do this. So we're always looking to find new and unique content that you won't find anywhere else that can go on our Patreon.
Yeah, we've also had a few people joining recently who have taken advantage of the 10% off offer by subscribing for a year. That's really great. So thank you for joining us and committing to us for a year. That makes a big difference. So you can get 10% off annual subscriptions as well. You can do that at patreon.com/sweeperpod. Otherwise, we'll see you for another global roundup on Wednesday, the 3rd of September.